snakes in the grass. Rattle, 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 rattle,
Yoko Ono. Born February 18th, 1933. Is a Japanese multimedia artist, singer, songwriter and peace activist. Her work also encompasses performance art and filmmaking. Ono grew up in Tokyo and moved to New York City in 1952 to join her family. She became involved with New York City's downtown artist scene in the early 1960s, which included the Fluxus Group, and became well known in 1969 when she married English musician John Lennon of the Beatles, with whom she would subsequently record as a duo in the Plastic Ono Band. The couple used their honeymoon as a stage for public protests against the Vietnam War. She and Lennon remained married until he was murdered in front of the couple's apartment building, the Dakota, on the 8th of December 1980. Together they had one son, Sean, who later also became a musician. Ono began a career in popular music in 1969, forming the Plastic Ono Band with Lennon and producing a number of Avante Garde music albums in the 1970s. She achieved commercial and critical success in 1980 with the chart-topping album Double Fantasy, a collaboration with Lennon that was released 3 weeks before his murder, winning the Grammy Award for Album of the Year. To date, she has had 12 number one singles on the US dance charts, and in 2016 was named the 11th most successful dance club artist of all time by Billboard magazine. Many musicians have paid tribute to Ono as an artist in her own right and as a muse and icon, including Elvis Costello, the B-52s, Sonic Youth and Meredith Monk. As Lennon's widow, Ono works to preserve his legacy. She funded the Strawberry Fields Memorial in Manhattan's Central Park, the Imagine Peace Tower in Iceland, and the John Lennon Museum in Saitama, Japan, which closed in 2010. She has made significant philanthropic contributions to the arts, peace, disaster relief in Japan and the Philippines, and other such causes. In 2002, she inaugurated a biennial $50,000 Lennon-Ono grant for peace. In 2012, she received the Dr. Rainer Hildebrandt Human Rights Award and co-founded the group Artists Against Fracking. Ono was born in Tokyo City on February the 18th, 1933, to mother Isoko Ono and father Yusuke Ono, a wealthy banker and former classical pianist. Isoko's adoptive maternal grandfather, Zenjiro Yasuda, was an affiliate of the Yasuda clan and Seibatsu. Yusuke came from a long line of samurai warrior scholars. The kanji translation of Yoko means ocean child. 2 weeks before Ono's birth, Yusuke was transferred to San Francisco, California by his employer, the Yokohama Specie Bank. The rest of the family followed soon after, with Ono first meeting her father when she was 2 years old. Her younger brother Kusuke was born in December 1936. In 1937, the family was transferred back to Japan, and Ono enrolled at Tokyo's elite Gakushin, also known as the Peers School, one of the most exclusive schools in Japan. Ono was enrolled in piano lessons from the age of 4 until the age of 12 or 13. She attended kabuki performances with her mother, who was trained in shamisen, koto, otsumi, kotsumi, nagauta, and could read Japanese musical scores. The family moved to New York City in 1940. The next year, Yusuke was transferred from New York City to Hanoi, and the family returned to Japan. Ono was enrolled in Kaimiya Gakun, an exclusive Christian primary school run by the Mitsui family. She remained in Tokyo throughout World War II and the firebombing on March 9, 1945, during which she was sheltered with other family members in a special bunker in Tokyo's Asabu district, away from the heavy bombing. Ono later went to the Karuzawa mountain resort with members of her family. Starvation was rampant in the destruction that followed the Tokyo bombings. The Ono family was forced to beg for food while pulling their belongings in a wheelbarrow. Ono said it was during this period in her life that she developed her aggressive attitude and understanding of outsider status. Other stories tell of her mother bringing a large number of goods to the countryside where they were bartered for food. In one anecdote, her mother traded a German-made sewing machine for 60 kilograms of rice to feed the family. During this time, Ono's father, who had been in Hanoi, was believed to be in a prisoner of war camp in China. Ono told Amy Goodman of Democracy Now! On October 16, 2007, that he was in French Indochina, which is Vietnam, actually, in Saigon. He was in a concentration camp. After the war ended in 1945, Ono remained in Japan when her family moved to the United States and settled in Scarsdale, New York, an affluent town 25 miles north of Midtown Manhattan. By April 1946, Gakushin was reopened and Ono re-enrolled. The school, located near the Tokyo Imperial Palace, had not been damaged by the war, and Ono found herself a classmate of Prince Akihito, the future Emperor of Japan. At 14 years old, she took up vocal training in lieder singing. Ono graduated from Gakushin in 1951 and was accepted into the philosophy program of Gakushin University as the first woman to enter the department. However, she left the school after 2 semesters. Ono joined her family in New York in September 1952 and enrolled at nearby Sarah Lawrence College. Ono's parents approved of her college choice, but disapproved of her lifestyle and chastised her for befriending people whom they felt were beneath her. In 1956, Ono left college to elope with Toshiichi Yanagi, a star in Tokyo's experimental community, then studying at Juilliard. At Sarah Lawrence, she studied poetry with Alistair Reid, English literature with Catherine Mansell, and music composition with the Viennese-trained Andre Singer. Ono has said that her heroes at this time were the 12-tone composers Arnold Schoenberg and Alban Berg. She said, "I was just fascinated with what they could do. I wrote some 12-tone songs, then my music went into an area that my teacher felt was really a bit off track. And he said, Well, look, there are people who are doing things like what you do, and they're called Avante Garde. Singer introduced her to the work of Edgar Varese, John Cage and Henry Cowell. Ono left college and moved to New York in 1957, supporting herself through secretarial work and lessons in the traditional Japanese arts at the Japan Society. Ono has been often associated with the Fluxus Group, a loose association of Dada-inspired avant-garde artists, which was founded in the early 1960s by Lithuanian-American artist George Mashunas. Mashunas admired and enthusiastically promoted her work and gave Ono her first solo exhibition at his AG Gallery in New York in 1961. He formally invited Ono to join Fluxus, but she declined because she wanted to remain independent. However, she did collaborate with Mashunas, Charlotte Morman, George Brecht, and the poet Jackson Maclow, among others associated with the group. Ono first met John Cage through his student Ichi Yanagi Toshi in Cage's experimental composition class at the New York School for Social Research. She was introduced to more of Cage's unconventional neo-Dadaism firsthand and via his New York City protégés Alan Capro, Brecht, Maclow, Al Hansen and the poet Dick Higgins. After Cage finished teaching at the New School in the summer of 1960, Ono was determined to rent a place to present her works along with the work of other avant-garde artists in the city. She eventually found an inexpensive loft in downtown Manhattan at 112 Chambers Street and used the apartment as a studio and living space, also allowing composer Lamonte Young to organize concerts in the loft. They both held a series of events there from December 1960 through to June 1961. The events were attended by people such as Marcel Duchamp and Peggy Guggenheim. Ono and Young both claim to have been the primary curator of these events, with Ono claiming to have been eventually pushed into a subsidiary role by Young. Ono presented work only once during the series. In 1961, some years before meeting John Lennon, Ono had her first major public performance in a concert at the 258-seat Carnegie Recital Hall, smaller than the main hall. This concert featured radical experimental music and performances. The Chambers Street series hosted some of Ono's earliest conceptual artwork, including Painting to be Stepped On, a scrap of canvas on the floor that became a completed artwork upon the accrual of footprints. With that work, Ono suggested that a work of art no longer needed to be mounted on a wall and inaccessible. She showed this work and other instructional work again at Macunas's AG Gallery in July 1961. After Ono set a painting on fire at one performance, Cage advised her to treat the paper with flame retardant. She is credited for the album cover art for the album Nirvana Symphony by Toshiro Mayuzumi, released by Time Records in 1962. After living apart for several years, Ono and Ichi Yanagi filed for divorce in 1962. Ono returned home to live with her parents and, suffering from clinical depression, was briefly placed into a Japanese mental institution. On November the 28th, 1962, Ono married Anthony Cox, an American jazz musician, film producer and art promoter who had been instrumental in securing her release from the mental institution. Ono's second marriage was annulled on March 1st, 1963 because she had neglected to finalize her divorce from Ichi Yanagi. After finalizing that divorce, Cox and Ono married again on June 6, 1963. She gave birth to their daughter Kyoko Chan Cox 2 months later, on August the 8th, 1963. The marriage quickly fell apart, but the couple continued working together for the sake of their joint careers. They performed at Tokyo's Sogetsu Hall, with Ono lying atop a piano played by John Cage. Soon the couple returned to New York with Kyoko. In the early years of the marriage, Ono left most of Kyoko's parenting to Cox while she pursued her art full-time, with Cox also managing her publicity. Ono had a second engagement at the Carnegie Recital Hall in 1965, in which she debuted Cut Piece. In September 1966, Ono visited London to meet artist and political activist Gustav Metzger's Destruction in Art Symposium in September 1966. She was the only woman artist chosen to perform her own events and only one of two invited to speak. She premiered The Fog Machine during her Concert of Music for the Mind at the Blue Coat Society of Arts in Liverpool, England in 1967. Ono and Cox divorced on February the 2nd, 1969, and she married John Lennon later that same year. During a 1971 custody battle, Cox disappeared with their 8-year-old daughter. He won custody after successfully claiming that Ono was an unfit mother due to her drug use. Ono's ex-husband changed Kyoko's name to Ruth Holman and subsequently raised the girl in an organization known as the Church of the Living Word. Ono and Lennon searched for Kyoko for years, but to no avail. She would finally see Kyoko again in 1998.
Sort of a low-key war against apathy. I don't know how you're doing on apathy over there, but we got a lot of it, boys and girls. A lot of what we do is designed to annoy people to the point where they might, just for a second, question enough of their environment to do something about it. You know? As long as they don't feel their environment and they don't worry about it, they're not going to do anything to change it. And something's got to be done before America scarfs up the world and shits on it.
Ono's first contact with any member of the Beatles occurred when she visited Paul McCartney at his home in London to obtain a Lennon-McCartney song manuscript for a book John Cage was working on, Notations. McCartney declined to give her any of his manuscripts but suggested that Lennon might oblige. Lennon later gave Ono the original handwritten lyrics to The Word. Ono and Lennon first met on November the 7th, 1966 at the Indicia Gallery in London, where she was preparing unfinished paintings, her conceptual art exhibit about interactive painting and sculpture. They were introduced by gallery owner John Dunbar. One piece, ceiling painting, Yes Painting, had a ladder painted white with a magnifying glass at the top. When Lennon climbed the ladder, he looked through the magnifying glass and was able to read the word yes, which was written in miniature. He greatly enjoyed this experience as it was a positive message, whereas most concept art he encountered at the time was anti-everything. Lennon was also intrigued by Ono's Hammer a Nail, where viewers were invited to hammer a nail into a wooden board painted white. Although the exhibition had not yet opened, Lennon wanted to hammer a nail into the clean board, but Ono stopped him. Dunbar asked her, "Don't you know who this is? He's a millionaire, he might buy it." Ono feigned not knowing of the Beatles. even as she had gone to see Paul McCartney asking for a Beatles song score, but relented on the condition that Lennon pay her 5 shillings. To which Lennon replied, "I'll give you an imaginary 5 shillings and hammer an imaginary nail in." In a 2002 interview, Ono said, "I was very attracted to him. It was a really strange situation." Ono started writing to Lennon, sending him her conceptual artworks, and soon the two began corresponding. In September 1967, Lennon sponsored Ono's solo Half a Wind show at Lisson Gallery in London. When Lennon's wife Cynthia asked for an explanation of why Ono was telephoning them at home, he told her that Ono was only trying to obtain money for her Avante Garde bullshit. In early 1968, while the Beatles were making their visit to India, Lennon wrote the song Julia and included a reference to Ono. "Ocean Child Calls Me," referring to the translation of Yoko's Japanese spelling. In May 1968, while his wife was on holiday in Greece, Lennon invited Ono to visit. They spent the night recording a selection of Avante Garde tape loops, after which, he said, they made love at dawn. The recordings made by the two during this session ultimately became their first collaborative album. The music concrete work, Unfinished Music No. 1, Two Virgins. When Lennon's wife returned home, she found Ono wearing her bathrobe and drinking tea with Lennon, who simply said, "Oh, hi."
No, 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 no.